Carter Alley wasn't on any city tour map. Tucked behind a row of crumbling warehouses and rusted chain-link fences, the narrow cul-de-sac had long been forgotten by developers. Until now. The new urban renewal project called for glass towers, open parks, shopping centers with cafes that served things no one in Carter Alley could pronounce. Every house on the block had accepted a payout. All but one. Number 17. Elias Monroe, 78 years old, veteran, retired train mechanic, had lived there for 43 years. The roof leaked, the front steps were cracked, but the house stood like its owner. Silent, stubborn, immovable. On the morning the city posted the final eviction notice, Elias was already up. He stood on his porch, faded veteran's cap on his head, mug of black coffee in one hand, and a small photo frame in the other. A young woman smiling in sepia, forever locked in her 20s. He read the red-lettered paper they nailed to his door. Final notice of condemnation. This property has been seized under eminent domain. Demolition scheduled 14 days. Occupants must vacate immediately. Elias folded the notice without a word, then went inside and locked the door behind him. That same day, 2 city lawyers sat in a glass-walled office uptown, staring at a manila file with one name circled in red. Elias Monroe. "This is going to be a PR nightmare," said Claire Dunley, junior counsel. "He's a vet. The news is going to eat this alive if we bulldoze his house." Her boss, Gregory Shaw, didn't flinch. "We've offered him triple payout. Twice. The neighbors already took the money. This one's just trying to make a point." Claire hesitated. "What if he's hiding something?" "Like what, 100-year-old deed?" She didn't laugh back. "Then let's dig." Back in Carter Alley, Elias pulled a heavy box from the closet. Dust rose like old breath from the past. Inside, a rusted .45 Colt, a leather-bound notebook, and a key wrapped in oilcloth. He opened the notebook and flipped to the last page, handwritten in neat script. "If they ever come for the house, tell them what happened on June 3rd, 1981, and don't let them lie about it again." He touched the key, closed the box, and whispered, "It's time." 12 days later, when the demolition team arrived with chainsaws and hard hats, they were greeted by reporters. Elias had filed a motion in court, pro se, on his own, claiming historical protection, claiming government misconduct, claiming a cover-up. No one knew what it meant yet, but the word cover-up echoed through City Hall like a fire alarm. And someone, somewhere, started shredding documents. The photograph on Elias Monroe's mantle had been there for over 4 decades. Most people assumed it was his late wife. They were wrong. The woman in the photo was named Lydia Grace Carter, and once upon a time she had shaken the city to its knees. Inside the old house on Carter Alley, Elias sat at his kitchen table surrounded by court documents, yellowing newspapers, and a radio that still worked only if you smacked it just right. The house smelled of old wood and tobacco, silence and secrets. The photo sat beside him. Her eyes still burned, even in black and white. Meanwhile, in a cramped room in the city archives, Claire Dunley clicked through digital scans of property records. She hadn't stopped thinking about Elias Monroe's motion for injunction. He had filed it himself, typed, cited case law, and most notably, referenced incidents related to the Carter Commission 1981. But there was no such commission. Not officially. She dug further. Then she found it, in a box mislabeled as Sanitation Budget 1980-1983. At the bottom of the file, a scanned memo with one red-stamped word across it. Sealed. Claire printed it anyway. It was a faded report, barely legible, from a city investigator named Marcus L. Grant. It referenced a protest that took place on Carter Alley in the summer of 1981. 7 dead, 5 unidentified. Official story, gas leak explosion. Real cause, police raid on squatter protest. Unauthorized force. Orders came from above. Lydia Carter presumed killed. Body never found. Building sealed within 48 hours. Claire blinked. Carter Alley. Carter. Lydia Grace Carter. Her heart skipped. She Googled the name. A flurry of results came up, mostly conspiracy forums, blog posts from 10 years ago, a few student thesis papers, but no photos, no closure, no official acknowledgement, just a myth. Until now. Back on Carter Alley, Elias opened the old notebook. His handwriting was tight and deliberate, a habit from years as a railroad technician. He turned to the first page and read aloud to the empty house. June 3rd, 1981. They came with riot gear at 3:12 a.m. No warning, no warrants. Lydia had been organizing protests against illegal evictions. She believed the city was targeting low-income black families for removal. She was right. The notebook detailed everything: names of officers, commands overheard, people who disappeared. It wasn't just a raid, it was an erasure. The building that was firebombed that night? It was where Lydia and others had gathered for what they called a freedom hearing, a symbolic protest tribunal to hold the city accountable. They never got to finish it. That building stood where Elias's house now sat. His home was not built after the raid. It was built on top of it. The next day, Claire stood outside number 17. She had no appointment. Elias opened the door like he already knew she was coming. "Miss Dunley, you're not the kind that just follows orders." She nodded. "I found the report." He let her in. The house was like a museum, not of wealth, but of survival. Old clocks, handwritten notes, a folded American flag in a triangular case. And the photo. She stopped in front of it. "Is that her?" "Yes," Elias said. "And why does the city say she never existed?" "Because they made her disappear, and the city doesn't resurrect ghosts that haunt them." Elias poured coffee and told her the whole story. He'd been the building's night watchman. Back when Carter Alley was more than just a dead end, it was a home for immigrants, artists, and activists. He'd seen Lydia Grace Carter speak, her voice louder than any bullhorn. He remembered the night they came. It rained that night. Hard. The kind of rain that washed the gutters and made the rats nervous. Carter Alley glistened under the orange glow of broken streetlights. Number 17 stood like a stubborn monument against the dark. Inside, Elias Monroe sat at the foot of the stairs holding the rusted key wrapped in oilcloth. He hadn't touched it in decades. Not since Lydia disappeared for good. Across the table, Claire Dunley stared at a printed map, one of the few unearthed from the city's 1936 underground utility plans. "According to this," she said, tracing a thin red line with her finger, "there's a sealed maintenance tunnel that runs under the alley. It connects the old textile mill to what used to be a storage facility 2 blocks south." "That storage building," Elias said, "was a safe house." Claire looked up. "For who?" For people the city wanted gone, Elias said simply. By morning, the court had granted a temporary injunction on the demolition, 10 days. The news broke across the city like a crack of thunder. Elderly man files legal block on eviction, alleges city cover-up of 1981 fatal raid. Mayor Lorman called it a distraction, but the court called it plausible cause. Claire had done her job, for now. But Elias knew better to think time meant safety. The tunnel had been sealed for a reason, and if what he remembered was still down there, the city would never let it surface. That night, with the storm pounding and the alley deserted, Elias unlocked the basement hatch. Claire followed him down. The basement was musty and lined with old boxes, some labeled repairs, others unlabeled entirely. Near the far wall, a large shelf had been pushed aside to reveal a panel of warped plywood nailed over bricks. "This was bricked over in '85, Elias said. "I kept it hidden." He began pulling at the boards. Behind them was a rusted metal door. He slid the old key in. It stuck, then gave. The door creaked open into darkness. They stepped into the tunnel with nothing but flashlights and their breath. The air was thick, damp, and metallic. The walls were lined with crumbling concrete, rusted brackets, and the occasional piece of graffiti. Claire noticed words scratched into the wall. June 3rd, 1981. Never forget. She turned to Elias. This was real. He nodded, then added, "It gets worse." The tunnel twisted left, then down, and then opened into a cavernous space once used as a storage bay during the Prohibition era. Dust-covered crates still sat like coffins in the corners, and in the center, beneath a tarp, something waited. Elias pulled it back. Claire gasped. It was a massive wooden board etched by hand. Names. Dozens of names. Some carved carefully, others hurriedly, like someone knew time was running out. Claire ran her fingers over the surface. Lydia Grace Carter, top center. Alonzo B. Wade, next. Yvette Moreno. Unknown woman, number 3. Child, age 9. And at the bottom, burned in with a soldering iron. We were here. They erased us, but not all of us. Claire turned to Elias. You documented this. He nodded. They told the papers it was a gas explosion, but it wasn't. It was tear gas and firebombs. Lydia started carving the names after the first raids. We kept the rest going. And you kept it hidden? Until someone was brave enough to listen. Suddenly, from the tunnel entrance, a voice echoed. Put your hands where I can see them. Flashlights. Boots. 2 men in black windbreakers moved in fast, one with a stun gun, the other reaching for a weapon. Claire raised her hands. We're not trespassing. This is part of a legal motion. You're in a restricted zone, one snapped. Emergency safety inspection. Elias stepped between Claire and the men. 3 days remained before the injunction expired. Claire Dunley stood in the city clerk's office, heart pounding, as a junior archivist slid an ancient cardboard box across the counter. This was misfiled, he said, glancing around nervously. Technically, I'm not supposed to give it to you. I was never here, Claire said. Inside the box, a half-dozen manila folders, some scorched, others water-damaged. One folder was labeled Carter L. Sensitive, Do Not Index. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Lydia Grace Carter, social justice organizer, born 1952, arrested 4 times for unlawful assembly, never convicted. Graduated Columbia, known agitator, especially in eviction protests. Then, nothing after 1981. No death certificate, no autopsy, just one notation handwritten in red ink. Presumed deceased. Disposition sealed by executive order. Claire whispered aloud, "She never died." Back in Carter Alley, Elias opened a small trap door in the bedroom closet. Inside, a rusted coffee tin. He dumped the contents on the bed. Photos. Letters. One driver's license expired in 1989. All under a different name, Rebecca Lane. He held a letter dated October 1982. "Elias, I'm in Oregon. Change the name like you said. Teaching again. Tell no one. If you ever see my photo again, it means I've been found, or worse." He stared at it for a long time, then folded it, kissed it gently, and tucked it into his pocket. At City Hall, Mayor Lorman faced pressure from all sides. Protesters had started gathering at Carter Alley. Local news ran headlines like, "City erased the dead. Now it wants the last witness gone." The mayor turned to his chief of staff. "Get rid of the lawyer, the old man, all of it, quietly." "But sir," "I don't care. I want this story dead by Friday." That night, Claire sat in her apartment when the power cut out. Then her phone, then her Wi-Fi. Seconds later, someone knocked on her door. Not hard, just once. She didn't move. She reached for her bag, grabbed the flash drive she'd copied the tunnel photos onto, and slipped it into her coat. Another knock, slower, deliberate. She waited, and whoever it was, left. The next morning, she drove straight to Carter Alley and gave the flash drive to Elias. "Hide it. If anything happens to me, make sure it gets out." Elias nodded, then said quietly, "There's something you need to know." He placed a faded newspaper clipping in her hand. The headline read, "3 killed in suspicious fire. Woman escapes hospital custody." There was a grainy photo below, a woman being led away in handcuffs. Claire squinted. "That's her," Elias said. 3 months after the raid. The city claimed she died, but she was caught in a protest out west. They brought her back under a fake name. And then? She vanished again, only this time for good. Claire stared at the photo. The woman was older, scarred, but her eyes were the same as the photo on Elias's mantle. She survived 2 disappearances. "No," Elias said. "She survived 3. Later that day, Claire returned to her office only to find her desk cleared. A note on it, "You've been reassigned. Please turn in your badge." She didn't argue. She didn't need the city anymore. She had the truth. And somewhere far from Carter Alley, in a sunlit kitchen with plants on the sill, a woman in her 70s stirred her tea slowly. Her hands bore burn scars. On her wrist, a faded tattoo, LC 1981. She turned on the news, saw a photo of Carter Alley, and whispered, "He finally told them." Meanwhile, back at number 17, a black SUV pulled up again. 2 men stepped out. This time, one held a crowbar. But Elias was ready. He opened the front door. By the time the sun rose over Carter Alley the next day, the story had gone national. The New York Times ran a front-page feature, "Urban Renewal or Erased History? Inside Carter Alley's Forgotten Massacre." Cable news ran clips of the carved memorial wall under Elias's house. And then, just after 8 a.m., a video dropped online, anonymously. It was grainy, clearly recorded years ago on an old camcorder. The image shook, focused, and then stabilized on a woman sitting at a table. Her hair was tied back, her face worn but sharp. She looked directly at the camera. My name is Lydia Grace Carter. I survived June 3rd, 1981, and everything the city told you about that night was a lie. The video was less than 5 minutes long, but by 9 a.m. it had over 3 million views. By noon, protesters surrounded City Hall, and by nightfall, Mayor Lorman had issued a statement. We will fully investigate the historical claims and halt all redevelopment of Carter Alley pending a federal review. But it was too late for damage control, because the next leak came even harder. Claire had worked with an old journalist friend to upload the full archive. Scans of the sealed report, photos of the memorial tunnel, names of the officers who led the unauthorized raid, internal memos showing how records had been buried for over 4 decades. It was more than a scandal. It was a reckoning. That same night, Lydia called Elias. Her voice trembled on the line. "You told them." "I had to." "I know." Silence. Then she said, "I'll come back. If they're going to try and rewrite history again, I'll be damned if I let them do it without my name in the ink." She arrived 2 days later. No one recognized the woman in the old coat and wide-brimmed hat as she stepped off the train. Not until she entered Carter Alley, knocked once on 17, and Elias opened the door like he'd waited a lifetime. Claire stood behind him, stunned. Lydia smiled. "You're the lawyer, huh?" Claire nodded. "You made them listen. You gave us something worth hearing." The moment Lydia stepped back into the tunnel, she wept. She ran her fingers along the wall of names, then sat beside it like it was an altar. "We carved this with our hands, in the dark. No food, no running water, but we kept the memory alive, because memory is the only weapon they can't erase." Elias placed a new wooden plank beside the old. They carved one more name together. Not a victim, but a survivor. Lydia Grace Carter, witness. But Carter Alley wasn't done shaking. 2 nights later, shots were fired. Someone put a bullet through Elias's window. No one was hit, but the message was clear: disappear again or else. Claire took Lydia to a safe house across the river. Journalists swarmed her within hours. She refused all interviews, except one. At midnight, she sat in front of a camera and told her story in detail. What happened the night of June 3rd, what she saw, what they took, and why she had to vanish. The video broke the internet, and the next day, federal subpoenas landed on every desk at City Hall. Investigations launched into Mayor Lorman, multiple real estate developers, and a former police commissioner now running a security firm. But Lydia, she walked back into Carter Alley, head high. She stood on Elias's porch and said to the gathered crowd, "You tried to bury us under concrete, but we were seeds, and now we've grown." The city offered to declare number 17 a historical landmark. Elias refused. "I don't want a plaque. I want justice." Claire filed for full exoneration of all victims from the 1981 raid. She filed motions for charges against those still alive who covered it up. And then she filed one final petition to have Carter Alley renamed Carter Street in memory of Lydia. The vote passed unanimously. But on the final night before the house was set to be landmarked, someone set fire to number 17. Elias was inside. He never made it out. Lydia arrived minutes too late. She stood in the street as the flames consumed the house. Claire tried to hold her back, but Lydia dropped to her knees, silent. 3 weeks after the fire, Lydia Carter stood at the edge of the ashes that had once been Elias Monroe's home. Nothing remained but blackened timber, a half-melted mailbox, and the iron hinges of a front door that had once defied the city itself. Claire Dunley stepped beside her, holding a thick envelope. "He mailed this the day before it happened," she said quietly. Lydia didn't reach for it. "Is it his testimony?" Claire nodded. "And something else. Something I think he meant for you alone." That evening, in a borrowed apartment above a bookstore in Harlem, Lydia finally opened the package. Inside were two things: a leather-bound notebook, Elias's last writings, and a sealed envelope marked, "For Lydia, when the time is right." She opened the notebook first. It was full of reflections, names of the fallen, regrets, memories of laughter in the alley, days before it all collapsed. But at the very end, scrawled in shaky pen, he had written, "You asked me once, Lydia, why I stayed behind, why I built the house, why I lived there alone. It wasn't just to protect your memory, it was to protect your son." Lydia froze. Her hand clutched the paper. "Son?" She opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a birth certificate. Name, Daniel Elias Carter. Date of birth, October 14th, 1981. Mother, Lydia G. Carter. Father, unknown. Adoptive guardian, Elias Monroe. A photograph fell out. A baby in Elias's arms, wrapped in a wool blanket, staring at the camera with Lydia's eyes. Lydia couldn't breathe. She stumbled back into the chair. She remembered the night in the safe house, the way her body bled and shook, how she thought the child hadn't survived, how the woman helping her had said nothing, only took her away under a new name. "They told me he died," she whispered. Claire arrived hours later to find Lydia weeping over the notebook. She read the birth certificate. "I found him," she said gently. Lydia looked up. Claire continued, "He's alive, 43 years old, married, works as a civil engineer, name's Daniel Lane, grew up in Queens. Elias raised him as his nephew." Lydia's voice cracked. "Does he know?" Claire shook her head. "Not yet." The next day, Lydia watched from a distance as Daniel Lane gave a speech at the Carter Alley Memorial Site. He stood tall, dignified, unaware of the truth he carried in his blood. He said, "Elias Monroe was the kind of man who believed that one house could hold back an empire, and maybe it did, because that house held truth, and truth, when given a voice, will always find a way." Lydia clutched her chest as tears slid silently down her face. She didn't approach him, not that day. Instead, she walked the length of Carter Street, the newly renamed lane, until she reached the reconstructed tunnel memorial, now preserved under plexiglass and city protection. At the far end, a new wall had been added. Visitors could submit names of the forgotten. Lydia stepped forward, took the carving tool from the security guard's hand, and beneath the final row of names, she etched, "Daniel Elias Carter, born of fire, raised in truth." Later, when Daniel visited the wall alone, he saw the new name. He stared at it for a long time, then looked up. Across the street, Lydia Carter stood. No coat, no hat, just her face. Their eyes met, and in that moment, he knew. No words passed between them, just a nod, a tear, a connection not of blood, but of memory, of legacy. Months passed. An official investigation charged 4 former city officials with obstruction and conspiracy. The city issued a formal apology for the 1981 raid.